going to find out tonight is what the Pope doesn't know about human sexuality. So to begin with, why do we have sex in the first place? Well, that's a question that people have been asking for years. Biologists have been asking, all sorts of subspecialties have been asking, and I think we finally got the answer. Has anybody read the book Parasite Rex? Oh, okay. Well, don't read it. I do not recommend that book, because after you finish reading it, you'll have nightmares for months afterwards. You don't know how many parasites are either already in you or are trying to get in you right now. You are just a host. You're like the school bus for parasites. You just carry them around and then they give them to other people. There's a lot of parasites in us. And that's probably why we have sex, because so many animals are sexual and have sex frequently to reproduce. It jumbles up the DNA. Well, in jumbling up the DNA, you make it harder for parasites. And by parasites, I don't mean just, flukes and things like that. I mean viruses, bacteria, anything that takes a ride on you without your permission, so to speak, is a parasite. So if you jumble up the DNA on a regular basis, it makes it harder for the bacteria to catch up with you, or or the malaria to catch up with you, or whatever. You can stay ahead, or at least some parts of the population stay ahead. So that's probably why we have sex. And the reason I mentioned the book Parasite Rex is it really documents all the evidence we have for sexuality among all sorts of creatures, and why it would be so important in many kinds of animals and populations. So the best theory is simply parasites, why we have sex. But that's pretty basic. And here's one of the reasons why. You realize that bananas that we eat today people weren't eating these bananas in the 1930s. In the 1920s, there was a very delicious banana. According to my own grandparents, bananas in the 1920s were much more delicious than the ones we have now. And the reason for that is there was a parasite, a fungus in this case, called Panama virus, and it killed off all of the bananas on the planet of that particular variety, because bananas are clones. Every banana is a clone of another banana. So the banana world was wiped out. They had to develop a whole new clone that was resistant to that Panama virus. So the bananas you're eating today are resistant to that, were resistant to that virus, and it's coming back. The Panama virus is now spreading throughout Indonesia. It's only a matter of time. We might not have bananas for 4, 5, 6 years. Who knows if it makes it into Panama. But what's the problem? You got cloning. Cloning means there's no genetic variety. They're not mixing up the DNA, so it makes it real easy for parasites, viruses, funguses, whatever, to catch up and take full advantage of the organism. So let's talk more specifically, though, about sex organs. There was a fellow named Darrel Ray back in the 1700s who's the father of classification. If you had biology, you probably remember his name. Well, Darrel Ray was accused of being a sex maniac, sex fiend, because he liked to look at sex organs. Now that sounds pretty bizarre, doesn't it? But he learned if you look at sex organs, you can classify an entire species just by looking at the sex organs. Here is a sex organ. Here's another sex organ. Here's another sex organ, and yet another one. And oh, by the way, these particular flowers, as we know them, aren't that distant, and they're related. They're not that far apart, and yet look how different their sex organs are. And that's all a flower is. A flower is just a sex organ. So what Linnaeus noticed was there's tremendous differences among flowers. And he could classify entire species just based upon the sex organs of those flowers. In other words, and what he didn't know, because Darwin had not come along yet, what he didn't know was that's just evidence that flowers are constantly evolving and changing, responding to the environment, to the insects that are available to pollinate, or the soil composition, or the predators that are in the environment. All those things are pushing flowers one way or the other to evolve and change to stay ahead of the crop. Things that might eat them, or things that stay with things that might pollinate them. So, animal sex organs, come on, why are we not doing this? Animal sex organs are evolving rapidly as well. In fact, you can almost classify animals by their sex organs, just like you classify flowers. But you don't hear about people talking about animal sex organs, because that's really perverted. All right, so let's look at one little animal. It's called the Argentine bluebill. Now, if you're concerned about pornography, well, either close your eyes or leave, because we're going to get into the porn part right here pretty soon. The Argentine bluebill is a waterfowl with a penis. Only 3% of all birds on the planet have penises. The other 97% do not have penises. So it's kind of a rare thing among animals, but it also seems to be more common among waterfowl than birds that are not water birds. The Argentine bluebill is an amazing duck. He's like the John Holmes of the duck world. Okay, if you laugh, you're telling me something. Yeah, and we're going to see a little bit of duck porn here, but before I do, I want you to understand the world of a duck. Ducks are really into sex. They like to have a lot of sex. And I had ducks in my pond. I have a big 1.5-acre pond in my front yard. And I had ducks, geese, and swans on my pond. And I noticed that a female duck would take a liking to one of the male ducks, and she'd waddle real sexy in front of him. He'd get the message. He'd jump on, do his business, and hop off. Well, that got the attention of all the other guys. And what would they do? They'd jump on. And they would rape her. And it's absolutely rape. There's no question about it. She does not want him to do it. She tries to get away. She yells and screams in a way she didn't do when the guy she liked was on her. She will dive underneath water. Some ducks, I've been told, will even drown trying to get away from males, but they don't want to be raped. So I noticed this in my own ducks, and later found out that it's common. It's not just my ducks, the raping, it's all ducks rape. Raping is a big thing among duck culture. We'll come back and understand what that's all about in a minute. But you've got to kind of understand what the duck world is like and how different it is, and in some ways how similar too. So here's a duck penis. I'm going to show this to you twice. So watch it really carefully or close your eyes. I don't care what you do. And we'll then ask a few questions. This is slowed down 10 times. Imagine it's 10 times faster than normal, than what we see here. Oop. All right. One more time. The full effect of it here. All right. Guys, that look like yours? That is. You know, in humans, in all mammals, the penis is run off the blood pressure system. But in ducks, in waterfowl, the penis is run off of the lymph system. You have a lymph system, and it has pressure. But you may not realize you could actually pressure a penis off of the lymph system. The other thing is you'll notice that penis is kind of crooked, kind of coiled. For years, decades, biologists asked, why are duck penises so large? That is 2/3 of the length of the entire duck. When I said he's the John Holmes of the duck world, I wasn't kidding. You guys don't know who some of you don't know who John Holmes is. John Holmes was like Mr. Mega Big Penis in the porn world back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, he had like a 12-incher or something. It was horrifying. So this duck, and all ducks have big penises. The interesting thing about duck penises, though, is they grow them every year, and then when the mating season is over, they reabsorb them. Why carry that big thing around if you don't need it? I mean, that's kind of the duck philosophy, if you will. So they reabsorb them every year. Another interesting thing about the duck world is if there's a lot of male competition out there, the dominant ducks in a flock will grow a longer, bigger penis. The less dominant will grow a smaller penis. And if the duck's not get many that particular season, he will reabsorb his penis early in the mating season. Hey, why do you expend all that energy if you're not mating with anybody? Maybe next year some hunter will kill the male that's got all the ladies this year, and then he can have a shot at it. He'll grow longer one next year. So you can see right there, social pressure has a direct relationship on the biological response of the sex organs of the duck. You're learning far too much today about ducks, aren't you? Are we having fun with it? All right, so Dr. Patricia Brennan, out of the University of Edinburgh, decided she wanted to solve this problem once and for all. Why do duck penises, are they so large, and why are they corkscrewed, like we see here? So she did something absolutely radical. Nobody had ever thought to even do this before. She dissected the female reproductive tract of the ducks. And guess what she found? She found this. The male, this is another species, but you can see it's similar, corkscrewed. The female's corkscrewed too. The female's reproductive vaginal tract, if you will, is corkscrewed in the opposite direction of the male's. Males go one direction, females go the other direction. She also found that there's pockets here, all sorts of pockets that seem to be for some purpose, like stopping things. So she did some experiments. She took the male ducks and masturbated them, I guess. I don't know how you do that. And she put their penis in here, 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 here. And she found that the males could ejaculate efficiently through the straight pipette or through the one that was corkscrewed the same way as the male. If it was opposite or kinked, he had a hard time ejaculating or getting any ejaculate down very far at all. So, therein lies kind of the interesting solution to this problem. Why are they corkscrewed? Why is the female corkscrewed? So she had to ask one more question. Why is there so much rape, and who's getting the babies? Who is actually fertilizing the eggs? So she looked at the DNA of the eggs that came out of the nests of the female ducks. And what she found was 97% of all the babies were fathered by the ducks she liked, by the male ducks she liked. Only 3% were fathered by the rapists. Now, I don't tell this story when I do talks in Missouri, because we have Todd Aiken there. Todd seems to think humans can shut that whole thing down. Remember that? Remember that? Well, this does not apply to women or humans. Humans can't shut the whole thing down, but ducks can. Isn't that interesting? The female has control over who fertilizes her eggs and who doesn't fertilize her eggs. And she is very resistant to being raped. And if she is raped, what happens is the male can only get in a little ways. When he ejaculates, his ejaculate goes into these pockets and can never get up to fertilize the egg. That's what's going on in the female reproductive tract of the ducks. Now, you may think, wow, this is really strange stuff you're talking about here, Darrel. But it's not strange, because every sexual creature on this planet is doing exactly the same thing we see up here. This just seems unusual from our perspective. When I get into our reproductive system, we're just as crazy as the ducks are in our own way, but just different. So, what we call this, the biological term is antagonistic coevolution. So we can see antagonism between the male genitals and the female genitals. We can see a competition, if you will. So it's not really a war of the sexes, it's a war of the sex organs. Think about that. It's not just a war of the sexes. These organs are themselves evolving and changing, and in some cases very rapidly. And you can see ducks that aren't that far apart genetically having quite different reproductive tracts, or corkscrewed in different ways, or of different lengths. I mean, there's all sorts of varieties that you can find in the duck world. So keep this in mind, antagonistic coevolution, because it is working throughout the animal kingdom. There was a study about 15 years ago by a biologist. He went onto a pond, just a regular old Indiana pond, I guess, and he found 14 different water striders. You guys know what a water strider is. You know, it's an insect that strides on the top of the water. And 14 different species on the same pond. 14. Now, you and I could look at these species and we could not tell them apart. But you can tell water striders apart just by looking at their sex organs, because they have different combinations of sex organs. Most water striders have a variation of the bottle brush. How many of you used a bottle brush to clean out a baby bottle or something? Okay. Well, imagine that as a penis. And that's what water striders have. The bottle brush is actually a pretty common way to have penises in the animal world, because it allows you to brush out, clean out the guy that was there before you, and then you can get your own sperm in there. Keep that in mind for later, too. All right, so every species has a mating strategy for the males and for the females. We don't have a species mating strategy, and that's an important thing to remember. We do not have a human species mating strategy. We have a male species human strategy, mating strategy, and we have a female mating strategy. And they are in somewhat competition with each other through antagonistic coevolution. Here is a photograph of several different mammalian penises. Now, I could show you female vaginas, but it's harder to see differences and harder to dissect them, actually. But it's pretty obvious, just from looking at this, those are all different species. They're large mammal penis, species of large mammals. Isn't that interesting? Look how different those are. Radically, dramatically different. And they're all mammals. Guys, any of those look like yours? Still haven't found one, have they? We'll get there. This is the echidna. I was just in Australia. Spent a month in Australia in February. This is the cutest little guy. He's called a spiny anteater. He is not related to any anteater on the planet, and he's got spines like a porcupine. He's not related to any porcupine either. His ancestors probably are separated from other mammalian ancestors by maybe 100 million years. Remember, this guy lives in Australia. He's one of only two animals that lay eggs. Monotremes, I'm sorry. Yeah, he's only one of two monotremes. What's the other monotreme? Platypus, right. Platypus and echidnas both lay eggs. So this little guy, he's got a tongue that's that long. He's like the John Holmes of the tongue world, I guess. It's really huge. And we got to feed him, he'd climb up. They said, don't touch him. Because when they're relaxed, they just look like a kitten or a cat. You just walk up and pet them in a real soft brown fur. But the minute they get scared, those spines come right up, and they're rather painful if you get one up in you. So anyway, isn't that a cute little guy? Did you see how long his nose is? How long his nose? And imagine his tongue goes out another 8 or 9 inches. She's getting ready to feed him there. Well, the reason I give you the echidna is because the echidna has an amazing penis. This is his penis. He has a 4-headed penis. Think about that. If the little head's doing the thinking for the big head, this guy's really in trouble. He actually ejaculates out of this. I'm using these terms. I guess you guys are old enough to know what I'm talking about. Little head, big head. Okay. He ejaculates out this one time, and then the next time he ejaculates out of that. He alternates back and forth. He never ejaculates out of these two. We don't know why he has four heads. It's just a pretty interesting. Guys, that one doesn't look like yours either, does it? You only have 1 head. He's got 4. But the echidna lives in, we saw 2 of them just out in the wild in Tasmania. Just walking around. They're all over the place down there. So, sex is actively evolving. What I've tried to show is that penises of all kinds are going all sorts of different directions. And so are the penises of the great apes. So we're going to look at some great apes. There's 4 great apes in my book. I do not count the orangutan. There's one that's geographically really isolated from the rest, and in terms of DNA and genetics, it's pretty isolated too. Some people put them in with the great apes. I don't. But we can have that argument later. So we got 4 great apes: the gorillas, we got the chimpanzees, the bonobos, that used to be called the pygmy chimps. They thought they were chimps, but they're really not. They're a separate species, and I'll come back and talk about the bonobos in a minute. And we have the humans. Of these, if we took penises and converted them into vegetables, which one of these, I'm trying to avoid the pornography here for a little while longer, which one of these would belong to which of the 4 great apes? What's our nominations here? Anyone want to throw out a guess?
Humans to pickle?
The humans to pickle? Any other guesses? Yeah.
The gorilla's that one.
The gorilla's that one? Yeah, back. Yeah.
I would say humans to carrot.
Humans to carrot? All right. All right. Those are the guesses. Well, okay, here's the answer. This is the human. This is the chimpanzee and the bonobo. And this is the gorilla. Isn't that interesting? Because size matters in the gorilla world, but just not penis size. Each primate has our own strategy, and the gorilla has a strategy, but it's not like the rest of the great apes. The gorillas in mammalian world, there's something called sexual dimorphism, and it just means the difference in size between the male and the female of the species. The greater the difference in the species, the more tendency there is for one male to dominate multiple females. Well, in the gorilla world, you'll get one silverback having 2, 3, 4 females that he tries to control. And so you see in the gorilla world, the big, hefty, meaty silverback, size matters, but it's body size that matters. It's not penis size that matters. It's huge, huge bodies that can dominate other younger or less powerful male gorillas. So they have a high degree of sexual dimorphism. The male gorilla is twice the size of the female gorilla. They're polygamous, and if you want to anthropomorphize, meaning one man, one male, several females. And but here's the key: the females are mobile. The female in the gorilla world, when the female becomes sexually mature, she has to leave the troop she's in and go and find a male partner, a male to mate with. So she has to leave her home and go somewhere else. It's a very common thing in some species. It actually keeps inbreeding from happening and other things like that. So she goes, and she has to find a mate, and she may stay with that silverback for 4 or 5 years. They have a baby with the silverback. They have 2 babies with the silverback. But when she gets tired of him, she leaves. There's no rule. I mean, how do you keep a female around if she can just walk away? You can't really put them in a room and lock the door. So, yeah, don't try that. It doesn't work very well. So, females are very mobile, and they want to mate with high-status big males. For whatever reason, that's the way that particular species is programmed. Now, sex lasts less than a minute, and they only have sex when the female is estrus, when the female is ready to have her eggs fertilized. Penis is 1 1/4 inches long. Gorillas have testes that are 1/2 the size of humans. You don't need much in the way of testes if you're only having sex once a month, and you're only having sex with a couple, 3 other females. It's just not a big priority. Sex is not a big thing for gorillas, except when it's mating time. So, it's not a very frequent mating process for them. So that's our gorillas. The next thing we're going to look at is what role sex takes on for other great apes. How many of you typed on a computer the last day or 2? Yeah, just about everybody in the room typed on a computer. Right. Did your hands evolve to type on computers? No, your hands evolved to grasp limbs, to grasp fruit. That's what your hands were evolved for. We have repurposed our hands to type, to do things that they were never intended to do. And what we're going to see as we look at the other great apes is they have repurposed sex to do things that almost no other species on the planet does. We have some unique characteristics as great apes that other species do not have. Besides, of course, thwarting parasites, we have repurposed ourselves for something besides keeping ahead of the latest and greatest diseases. What we'll see here is that sex may be repurposed for establishing dominance hierarchies. In some ways, the gorilla does a little bit of that. Create bonding so that the male and the female bond and stay together, to reduce conflict, and to reduce stress. Now, I don't know about you, but I've noticed that if I'm really, really stressed out, and I come home and I have good sex, it relaxes me. Anybody else notice that? Oh, you guys aren't having much sex. Okay. You're still in college. I can understand if you're a student. All right, so the chimp. Now, I say the way I name this chimp is that may the best sperm win. So the chimps have a different mating strategy. It's a multi-mate, frequent mating, male hierarchical system. So you've got a group of 3 or 4 males at the top of the heap that dominate everybody else, and the top males have access to almost all of the females. And the females present themselves and want to mate with the top males. No matter what the status of the female is, she generally doesn't want and doesn't present herself for mating to low-status females. They're not interested in the low-status females. They want to mate with the high-status males. They have a large penis. We saw that earlier, but still, relative to body size, not as big as the humans. They have extremely large testes, twice the size of humans. They can produce copious amounts of semen and sperm, just flooding amounts. And that's got a purpose. The female mates only with the higher status male, and they only mate in estrus. When the female is ready and goes into heat, she puts a big red billboard on her butt. And it's red as all get out, and it says, "I'm ready to mate." And she will actually present herself to the males she wants to mate with while she's in heat. But males are not particularly interested in the females if they're not in heat. They're only interested when the female, his butt is really, really red. Males have status alliances. There will be 2, 3, 4 males that are top dogs, and the alliances can shift and change sometimes. Anybody read any of Jane Goodall's work on The Shadow of Man? Okay. She's the first one to really document some of this stuff. Sex only lasts 30 seconds. We're getting worse here, aren't we? So if you don't like how much sex you're getting now, it's even worse if you're a chimp. All right, so that's the chimp. Now the reason I say may the best sperm win is what the chimp is doing. Part of the male strategy is to put as much semen into the vagina of the female so that he can flush the guy that was there out. It's a flush him strategy. Get rid of the other guy by flooding the vaginal area, and getting his own sperm in there. And remember, there are multi-mate species. One female may mate with 3 or 4 other males. So the guy who gets the most in there, the deepest, the longest, is the one that's going to fertilize the baby. Now the interesting thing is, they can still have a lot of sex and never have a baby. So probably having some fun there. That species might be having some fun. And we'll get back to that. Let's look at the bonobos next up. How many of you have read about the bonobos? Oh, good. So we've got a lot of you. Franz de Waals books on the bonobos. Anybody read the? Okay, yeah, good. Good. He's got some good stuff out there. I'm not really a fan of his latest book. I think he needs to stick with the bonobos. He tried to get into secular philosophy and stuff. Not sure he did as good a job as he did on the others. I do recommend all of his books except that one. All right, so in the bonobos, it's a female-dominated organizational structure. There's a committee of 2 or 3 females that kind of govern all the other animals in the troop. When a female becomes of sexual maturity, she has to leave the troop and go somewhere else. So it's kind of like the gorillas in that sense. They have to leave the troop, find somewhere else to reside. Within the bonobos, when she leaves the troop and goes to find somewhere else, the way she gets into the new troop is to kind of curry favor with the females, especially the high-status females. So she'll go up to the high-status females. She'll be very careful. She don't want to scare them or make them mad, and she'll start grooming the high-status females. If that works, then the next thing she does is go down on them and start giving them, head, if you will. So sex among the bonobos is the way you get into the troop. So that the high-status females get female-to-female sex from the new girl coming in. If they like that, then they allow her into the troop. If they don't, they kick her out. She has to go find somewhere else. Sex is everywhere among the bonobos. Let's imagine. We're walking through the forest, and I'm a bonobo, and I see a fruit tree. First thing I do is jump up and down and scream, "Hey, there's a fruit tree over here. Come on, let's have supper." Everybody comes around, they look at the fruit tree, and the first thing they do is have an orgy. Everybody has sex with everybody else. Males have sex with females, females have sex with females, and males have sex with males. Yes, all the combinations. And after everybody's had sex, then we settle down to eat. At my house we pray before we eat. Which do you think's better? I like the bonobos. Have sex before you eat. So, The bonobos have tons of different kinds of sex. If a predator's going through the forest and the bonobos are all hunkered down, scared, trying to not be eaten by the predator, when the danger is gone, they stand up, celebrate, and they have an orgy again. Sex everywhere. If two bonobos get in a fight, after the fight is finished, they have sex. So there's every combination of sex, and it's used for conflict resolution, for stress reduction, and for bonding the entire troop together. Because virtually everybody has sex with everybody else. The only kind of sex that's never been observed is sex between a mother and a son. Now remember, the daughters have to leave the troop. Sons stay with their mothers. So the mother always has the son around, and that kind of sex has never been seen in the bonobos. They have a large penis, the same size as the chimps, and they have huge testes, twice the size of humans, and they too produce copious amounts of semen. Well, you know, if you're having sex 17 times a day, you probably need extra amounts of semen to flush the other guy out, because there's always other guys in there. Now, here's the interesting thing about bonobos. They mate anytime they want to mate. They have sex anytime they want to have sex. Bonobos have hidden estrus. You know another species that has hidden estrus? Humans. We're one of the few species. There's about a half a dozen species on the planet that has hidden estrus. We are one of them. The bonobos are another. You cannot look at a bonobo female and tell if she's fertile or not. So that allows for sex anytime you want. And it really doesn't matter. Bonobos will have thousands and thousands of sex acts for every live birth. Thousands of them. Because the bonobos have repurposed sex. Sex is not for reproduction, or it's such a tiny, tiny part of their life. Sex is for stress relief, conflict management, and bonding. That's what sex is all about. Just like your hands have been repurposed to type on typewriters, bonobos have repurposed sex for those three things. Sex lasts 30 to 40 seconds. You know, it doesn't sound very long, but hey, you're having it 10 or 15 times a day, so you get a lot out of it. It's a lot more than we humans are going to get, probably. And thousands of sex acts for every live birth. Now let's look at a little comment. I found this the other day. It says here that bonobo societies, females are in charge, and sex rather than violence is used to keep order. And she says, well, thank God we've evolved. All the bonobos are having sex. So here's some photographs of our bonobo friends. This is two females here. Females have a clitoris that's about the size of my little finger, size of a small penis, and they love to rub clitorises together. According to Franz de Waal, it looks like females are having orgasms. He says a female bonobo, when she's in the middle of sex, has the same expression on her face that a human has when she's having an orgasm. So it appears similar kind of behavior. Here's a male and a female. I'm sorry it's not showing up very well. Having sex missionary style and French kissing. Now think about that. Chimps don't like missionary style. Chimps generally use doggy position. Bonobos like missionary style. Now here's a fantasy for you to think about. Imagine you're a fundamentalist creationist homeschooling parent, and you've decided to take kids to the zoo. As you're walking through the San Diego Zoo where they have bonobos, you see two bonobos in missionary position, screwing like bunny rabbits and French kissing. You think that might mess the lesson plan up for the day? Think about that. Guys, does that one look like yours? No, it doesn't. In fact, you just hold your finger out and taper it down a little bit, and that's what a bonobo's penis looks like, as does chimp's penis look like that. That does not look like ours, and yet we are probably somewhere in the realm of 98%, our genetics are 98% the same as bonobos and chimps. So what's going on there? Isn't that interesting? We've got quite a different penis there. Well, that penis is designed to go in and dump a whole lot of semen and come out. You just flood the other guy out. He's putting out 4 or 5 times as much semen, liquid stuff in the female. So we can see that there's a lot of rapid change in the outward signs of sex, but here's a recent piece of research that I found in Science News just last year. When scientists compared 1,880 proteins encoded by genes from humans and rodents, a number of proteins involved in reproduction ranked among those with the greatest number of changes. 3 are directly involved in sperm-egg interaction. All this tells us is that what we see in the manifestation of the sex organs themselves is also being manifested in the genes themselves. That the fastest evolving parts of our genetic makeup are our sex organs, our reproductive tract. That's the fastest evolving part of our entire makeup. So let's look at the human mating strategy, and as I said earlier, we're going to look at antagonistic coevolution in humans. So we can ask a few questions. Why is the penis so large? Why is it shaped so different from other primates? Why does human sex last so long? Why do humans have testes that are larger than gorillas, smaller than chimps and bonobos? Why does human sperm have different kinds of sperm? Why do women have hidden menstruation? Why is the female reproductive tract so hostile to sperm? It's actually difficult for sperm to get where they need to go. Because, ladies, you are really out to kill us once we put our sperm in there. So, and why do women have breasts? And, oh, by the way, bonobos have breasts, too. Chimps do not have breasts. Chimps, the female's as flat chested as a male, unless she's actually nursing. Bonobo females have breasts all year round. It's not just in response to lactation. So at least 2 species have bonobos and us have breasts. So everything we see in humans, we can find in other species. There's nothing totally unique about us. What's unique is our combination of characteristics. We have all the characteristics other species have, just in different proportions, so to speak. So this is where the porn starts, right here. If you're afraid of porn, it doesn't get much worse than this one. Guys, does this one look like yours? You can say yes if you want to. Okay. So this is a human penis, and it's quite different from the echidna's penis, or the duck's penis, or even the bonobo and chimp's penis. And it has some characteristics, some features, if you will. What are the features of the human penis that's different than the bonobo's penis? Anybody want to venture a guess?
The head.
What?
The head.
The head. You got it. You're smart, almost as smart as he is, right? Yep, the head. Look at that. That head has got a funny shape to it. That head has been a mystery to human sexual academicians for a century. Why is the human penis shaped so differently? What's its function? Until a man named Robin Baker came along. He was out of the University of Manchester in England. I don't know why all the sex research is coming out of England, but I guess it's because George Bush shut it all down at some point. What he found, Robin Baker went to the porn shop, and he bought one of those fake vaginas. You know, you guys been to the porn shop lately? You don't have porn shops here? Well, you can get online. Okay. He got one of those fake vaginas, and then he got a dildo. It was not properly shaped as well. And he took and created liquid of the viscosity of semen. Now, semen actually comes in about three different viscosities, if you will. So he tested all 3. He would inject the semen, or the liquid, the viscosity of semen, into the vagina, and then he would stick the dildo in and pump. And what happened? 80% of all the liquid that he had pumped in got pumped out. 80% of liquid got pumped out. That's an interesting find. It tells us that that is a penis pump. It's actually a vacuum pump. When the penis goes into the vagina, liquid can flow over easily. When the penis comes out of the vagina, the head, the coronal ridge, kind of scrapes the inside of the vagina and pulls it out. Much like the bottle brush penis of the insects I told you about earlier, the water striders. Does similar thing. So we have a penis pump that functions much like the water striders bottle brush thing, but it's very different than our closest relatives, the bonobo and the chimpanzee. Sex lasts for 4 to 10 minutes in humans. I mean, penetrative sex. Not talking about foreplay, not talking about cuddling afterwards, just how long you actually, penis and vagina, sex. 4 to 10 minutes. You'll notice that's longer than any of the other animals we've examined so far. Then the duck is probably 1 second is all the poor duck is having sex. And for the bonobos and the gorillas, it was 30 seconds to a minute. Humans have 4 to 10 minutes. Now, why do humans have such long sex? Well, that's what Robert Baker asked. So he did a bunch of research with actual humans. I mean, started with a porn shop, but he ended up getting some real humans to come in and have sex on camera, kind of like Kinsey did at the other Bloomington place, Indiana University. Oh, that's where the Kinsey Institute is. I spoke there. Well, that's intimidating. Go talk about sex at the Indiana University. That's really intimidating. They didn't kick me out, though. So, what he found, as I said earlier, that it pumps out 80% of the semen. Now, guys, when you're finished having sex, when you ejaculate it, what happens immediately afterwards? You deflate, right? Just like that, right? You deflate because you don't want to pump your own semen out. That's not going to work. You don't want to keep pumping because once you've ejaculated, you want to leave it there. Kind of keep it up in there, and you want to get out real slow and easy so you get the egg. Now, we got to ask a question. Why would evolution go to the trouble to make a penis that acts like a pump? What in tarnation is going on there? Any guesses? Well, I'll give you the answer. According to the Pope, we are a monogamous species. We only have sex with one person for a whole lifetime. If you believe that, I can sell you a bridge too, probably. Well, think about this. Why would we go to the trouble to create a penis that has a pump, that acts like a pump? Because we are a multi-mate species, just like the bonobos, just like the chimpanzees. Females of our species have been mating with multiple males for the entire history of our species. And this was kind of discovered accidentally back in the early 1950s. I mean, everybody says they're monogamous, but very few people really are. I would guarantee that most of the people in this room do not know a single monogamous person. Now, if you've never had sex, I'm not counting you yet. when you get of age to have plenty of sex, then we'll talk. But here's the deal. What does monogamy mean? What's the definition of monogamy? Well, I'll give it to you. Jesus said, monogamy is one sex partner per life, period. Paul said if your partner dies, better not to marry. But if you have to, okay, you can remarry. So at most, and you got to have some pretty extenuating circumstances for the church to approve second marriage. Of course, that's changed with the Catholic Church significantly in the United States. But one sex partner per life, that's monogamy. There's almost no species on the planet Earth that's monogamous. It is one of the rarest things to ever find. There's a fish called the anglerfish. And the male is pretty small, and the female is really big. And when they're ready to mate, the male just embeds himself in the skin of the female and stays there the rest of his life. That's monogamy, guys. That's monogamy. Now, the reason I say you probably don't know anybody, if I said, do you know anybody that's monogamous? If you raised your hand, I'm not asking you to raise your hand. If you raised your hand, my first question would be, if it's not you, how would you know? If it's not you, how would you know? And I don't know how many times people says, well, my mom and dad said they didn't have sex before married. They didn't have any other sex partners. Right. Going back to the 1950s, we have research saying that 95% of all Americans have sex before marriage. And granted, they may marry the person they had sex with, but a big percentage of them had sex with somebody they didn't marry, a very large percentage of them. So we know that alone tells us we're a multi-mate species. Because if you have sex with more than one person, you are not monogamous. And don't give me this serial monogamy bullshit. You're either monogamous or you're serially polygamous, maybe, or polyandrous. I don't care what you call it, but you are not monogamous. Monogamy means one sex partner per life, period. Now there's a big conundrum that's happened in the world of psychology in the world of sex research. going on for decades. Women report far fewer sex partners than men do. What's going on here? Why do women always seem to only have, say, 2.5 sex partners, and men have 10 sex partners? So there were some psychologists in Toronto. Did you see this research? Kind of interesting research. In Toronto, they decided they were going to test it. So they took a sample of men and women, controlled for economic, socioeconomic status, and all that sort of stuff. And they sat them down individually in a room with a researcher and asked a bunch of questions. One of the questions was, how many sex partners have you had in your life? The men, just to take a round number out of the air, the men said 10. Same thing for the women. They'd say, how many sex partners do you have? The women would say, 2.5. Now we're averaging across hundreds of people. I don't know which half will have a sex. But you know statistics, I hope. Okay, so then they changed the conditions. They did the same experiment with a different set of people, but this time they gave them a paper and pencil survey, sent them off into another room, and let them fill the survey out. But when they came out, they had to hand it to one of the so-called researchers. So a human could see their answer on that. Their answers were, men said they had had 10 sex partners, just like they said before. Women said they had 5 sex partners. Women doubled the number of sex partners they had with the second condition. Then they did, this is the most genius one, they did a new round of the same experiment. Only this time when they took them into the room, they hooked them up to a lie detector with the researcher on the other side of the desk. So now the men and the women are sitting in an office with a lie detector, and they may have the idea that they're going to get caught in the lie. They better tell the truth. So what happens at the end of the whole experiment? Men say they have 10 sex partners. Women say they have 10 sex partners. Isn't that interesting? I wondered for years, how can men have so many more sex partners than the women? Unless, of course, they're hiring a whole lot of hookers out there. That would be the only way I could think of around it. So in other words, women are having just as many sex partners as men are on average. Why are they underreporting it? Because our culture shames women for having too many sex partners. Don't ask me what too many is. Evidently, it's more than 2.5. All right. So, where did I go? So let's get into one more area that kind of gives us, we've talked about why is the penis shaped the way it is, and that we're multimate species, and that it's a pump. All these things point to the fact that we are not monogamous. We're having multiple partners over a lifetime, sometimes multiple partners very close together. In fact, our friend Robin Baker did a lot of work with real couples. What he found was if a man is separated from his partner for X period of time, and there's any suspicion that she could possibly have been with another man, his penis gets harder, and he pumps longer, and he ejaculates more semen than if he doesn't suspect she could have possibly been with another partner. Isn't that interesting? Men really get hard and horny when they think their gal's been with somebody else. And he's reproduced this over and over again. So let's look at one more piece, and that is sperm. Anybody heard? Robin Baker wrote a book called Sperm Wars about 7 or 8 years ago. And since that time, he got a lot of criticism for the book, but since that time, there's been quite a bit of replication of his work. Now, I'm not saying all of his work has been established beyond a shadow of a doubt, but a lot of it has been replicated at the University of Pennsylvania. There's been some major replication. What Robin Baker looks, for years, people said, why are there so many deformed sperm in human semen? In fact, when I was a kid, taking biology in high school, they talked about deformed sperm. Humans have about 85% deformed sperm. Well, it doesn't make any sense, really, when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Why are you screwing up 85% of the gametes, the most important cells in the whole body? And they didn't have an explanation for it until Robin Baker came along. He looked at these sperm. And what he found was something we've known all along. Lots of species create different kinds of sperm for different purposes. We've known this in other species, but nobody ever admitted it or looked at it deeply with humans. Kind of like what Dr. Patricia Brennan did in dissecting the female duck. He did by looking at the sperm from a different angle. What he found, there's 3 kinds of sperm. There's the getter sperm. Sperm that are designed to get in there and get the egg, fertilize the egg. 15% of your sperm, guys, are designed to get the egg. But you have another 40% or so, they're called warrior sperm. These sperm have proteins on the head of the sperm that are designed to kill other sperm. So, they're like heat-seeking missiles. When they find a sperm that doesn't belong to you, they go out and kill it. The third kind are blocker sperm. Now, ladies, close your ears here for just a second. This is just for the guys. Guys, when you masturbate, have you noticed after you masturbate, the semen gets sticky really quickly? Girls, you're grinning way too much there. I'm not seeing any heads nod, all right? It gets sticky really quickly, right? Well, that's the blocker sperm working. It coagulates like blood coagulating. And what it does is it's designed to create a block in the cervix to prevent other sperm from getting up and into the egg so it can fertilize, they can fertilize the eggs. Now, our gene, our blocker sperm gene, doesn't work as well as the chimps and bonobos. Chimps and bonobos' blocker sperm are incredibly strong, and they create a very strong plug right at the cervix of the female so that anybody else that mates with her is going to have a hard time getting to the egg. Now here's the genius of evolution and antagonistic co-evolution, if you will, and that is unblocker proteins. Some sperm have a protein that actually dissolves the block that the previous guy put there. It's like a war, isn't it? Only it's not a war between the sex organs of the male-female. Now it's a war between the sperm. And it's going on inside you ladies' own vagina. You're the place the war's going on. So if we're a multi-mate species, it all makes sense. Why the penis is shaped the way it is, why we have so many different kinds of sperm, why we have blocker sperm and unblocker sperm. All these things make sense, but only if our species has typically, over the course of our entire evolution, been multi-mate. One female having multiple males, oftentimes within a short period of time. You wouldn't need to flush the other guy out if his sperm were dead. The sperm only lasts about 5 days, inside your testes or inside the vagina. So why would you need to pump somebody out? Unless somebody probably had already been in there. So there's a lot going on here that the Pope didn't know about. Now, I'm not going to tell you why we have hidden estrus, why you cannot look at a human female and tell if she's ready for fertilization, because I'm going to refer you to a friend of mine. Anybody read P.Z. Myers? All right. Well, go to P.Z. Myers and Google or search on his website hidden menstruation, hidden estrus, and you'll get a great article that will explain to you why humans have hidden estrus. There's only about half a dozen species on the entire planet that have hidden estrus. It's very rare, but the bonobos are one of them. So we are a multi-mate species. We have sex for bonding, and that's a part of our sexual strategy. We have sex for recreation. And oh, by the way, we have 1,000 to 10,000 sex acts for every live birth. In fact, we have people in our culture right now that are choosing never to have children, which means every one of their sex acts is just for something else besides procreation. Procreation is a tiny, tiny, tiny part of our sexual strategy. We have repurposed our sexuality for totally different purposes, just like we've repurposed our fingers to type on computers. But people sex says you should have sex like a dog. Now think about this. Almost every species on the planet only has sex when the female is ready to be fertilized, have eggs to be fertilized. Insects, my dog, Sugar, if she was able to have sex, she's fixed, of course. A cow. You name a species, and almost every species on the planet only has sex when the female is fertile. That's interesting. How many of you have heard religionists say, well, you atheists just want to have orgies, and you just want to have sex all the time, and you want to have sex like an animal? Well, you know something? That's sex like an animal. The way the Pope wants it, only having sex for procreation. That's what the Pope tells people in his Catholic Church. So, in other words, the Pope thinks you should have sex like an animal. But, if you have sex anytime you want to, with willing and consensual people, enthusiastically consensual people, whether male or female, then you're having sex like a human. That's what you're having, a human sex. And I think we should think about this totally differently than the Catholics, the Baptists, or the Muslims have been thinking about or telling us. So here's the deal. Biology happens. No matter whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, a Mormon, Baptist, doesn't matter. Biology is going to happen, and religionists have a hard time channeling their sexuality in ways that are dictated by their religion. Now, where's the evidence for that? Well, I'm going to give you a question here, and you can see if you can answer it. Where is the top 10 porn search sites in the nation? What 2 states have the top porn site searches? Yeah.
Utah.
Utah, you got it. And second one.
Texas.
No.
North Carolina?
No. Mississippi. Oh, you got it? All right. Utah and Mississippi, the 2 most religious states in the United States, also have the top porn search sites in the United States. There was a great book came out about 3 years ago called A Billion Wicked Thoughts, and it was 2 guys, I think out of Southern Cal, who were computer gurus of some kind, and they talked a couple of these paid porn sites into letting them look at the data that they had, and they found amazing stuff. For example, they found that 40%, there's a very fundamentalist evangelical site just for Christian women. And what they found in their research was 40% of the women who visit that site also visit porn sites. Isn't that interesting? All right. Now, I think the last election with our friend Mitt Romney was interesting because if you look at this particular map, this is where the highest number of gay porn search sites are. Look at that. Now, that's not a perfect correlation, but it's pretty damn close, isn't it? The only outliers are this one and this one. All the others went for Romney. So if you are truly homophobic, you're much more likely, it seems to me, you must be pretty much into denying it, but also voting for people who are also homophobic. Did you see that research on homophobia? Recently they brought a bunch of men in, gave them this rather lengthy survey to assess their level of homophobia. Now they didn't tell them that's what they were doing, but they did. So it kind of created a homophobia list among all these males. You know. And then they put them in another room and they flashed pictures. You know, pictures of beautiful mountain scenes, pictures of women naked, or pictures of men naked, or whatever. And what they had a plethysmograph on the guy's penis. You know what a plethysmograph is? Plethysmograph? You know what it is? Yeah. It's a cock ring, guys. It's just a thing for measuring how much pressure is going in and out of the penis. We actually have one for females now, too. I can't remember the name of it, but it does the same thing. What they found was the more homophobic you were, the more your penis responded to gay porn. Isn't that surprising? Who would have figured? All right. So for a minute, imagine a world without religion. First of all, we would have age-appropriate, science-based sex education for children. Unlike, you guys don't have that. Well, you guys may in Illinois, but next door in Indiana, I guess they don't have that anymore. They got rid of it, I think. Women's sexuality and women's sex drive would be seen as normal. Sexual orientation wouldn't even be noticed. Who gives a damn what your sexual orientation is? It's your sexual orientation, not mine. Women would feel safe, and rape would be extremely rare. The rape statistics show that the more liberated cultures, the more women are liberated and the more political power women have, the less rape there is. In fact, the more religious cultures seem to be, the more rape there is. In fact, you can almost overlay high rape statistics in the United States with high religious states. They go over rather closely in many cases. There would be no shaming for abortion. That was your choice. There's no shame in it. Shame for abortion is a religious idea. You have to have an idea about what abortion means. It means, for the religious, one thing. For us, something very different. There would be no stigma for being single. Has anybody in here been shamed because you're not married and have grandkids yet? Or your grandparents? Yeah, right, yeah. And responsible sexual behavior would be the norm. We would just expect to negotiate condom use. or expect to get tested, or expect to talk about how what the status and basis of the relationship is. We wouldn't make assumptions. Religionists put down our throats. Male sexuality